I got them PC blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, they won't let me call my baby gal. I said I got them PC blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, they won't let me call my baby gal. Said they won't even let me call my baby, baby. If I can't call a woman, Lord, I'm throwing in the towel.
Hi. Good evening. Are we live? Am I live? Music down? All right. Hi, my name is McCarthy Coyle, and you're watching and listening to a public conversation brought to you on Missoula Community Access Television. And tonight we have a two-segment show. First, we have two members of the Missoula Local Government Study Commission. And later on in the show, we have Judge Chip Erdmann of the Montana Supreme Court, who wants to retain his seat. Getting right down to the nitty-gritty, the Montana Constitution provides citizens the opportunity to review their form of local government. And in May of 1994, Missoula City residents voted for such a review, although county-wide voters decided against any review of county government. Thus, the question of city-county consolidation was not to be considered. In November of 1994, Missoula voters selected 7 citizens who then became the Missoula Local Government Study Commission. And since then, this commission has held a total of 5 public hearings, 4 neighborhood meetings. This was in addition to their many regularly scheduled meetings, many of which were carried right here on MCAT. The commission hired a part-time professional, John Baldridge, to assist them in their endeavors. And these endeavors included numerous meetings with city officials and department heads, intensive study of other forms of local government, both in Montana and elsewhere. And individual study commissioners spoke with numerous community organizations. And they also studied neighborhood councils from both cities in Montana and elsewhere. And the commission also studied Missoula's budget and strategic plan and conducted an extensive citizen survey last October and November to learn more about local concerns and opinions. And we have 2 of those commissioners with us tonight to help explain their conclusions and recommendations as Missoulians go to the polls on June the 4th to accept or reject the commission's recommendations. And I'd like to welcome our guests tonight, Amy Peterson and Geoff Badenoch, who were elected by the citizens of Missoula. Come on in. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, McCarthy.
You bet. Just while you're getting your mics on, I'll tell you that since it's been about a year and a half since we voted for who should represent us on the study commission, I forget. I remember some of the people that I voted for. I don't remember whether I voted for either of you. And I voted absentee, and I was in Ireland at the time. And so my Irish confreres got a big kick as we sat around the breakfast table, and I filled in my ballot for the Missoula Local Government Study Commission. Geoff and Amy, thanks. In brief, the study commission believes that the city of Missoula should become a self-governing charter city. What is that?
You want to take that, Amy?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Self-governing powers basically allow the city of Missoula to have any powers that are not otherwise expressly prohibited either by the Montana or United States Constitution, state statute, or existing laws. So in addition to having the right to normal powers, which are called general powers, we also would have the right to enact or implement any other powers that are not expressly prohibited.
Just to clarify, in your position as the study commission, so you've come up with these recommendations. They'll be on the ballot, and we'll get to that specific language. But are you also in the posture of advocating, you know, in other words, as we go to the polls, are you advocates as well for your own recommendations? You believe that how does that work?
We're not necessarily advocating for our recommendations. We've worked very hard and long and done a lot of studying in terms of coming up with our recommendations. But our primary objective right now is to educate the public as to what we found, what research we have done, and then let the public make a decision from there. And therefore, we're engaged now in basically the public education process.
Well, Geoff, give us an example. You know, this. In other words, clearly it seems to be by reading your report, and your report is available to everyone to get a copy of.
That's
right?
correct. We have it on file at the libraries and around town in several places.
And but people would be able to get their own copy if they wanted to.
Yes, certainly.
Do you want to give them that address? I think it's the last sheet in there.
I know I can do this. Maybe I
We
can't.
need an extra.
Stagehand. There we go. This is our address
Okay.
and our phone number.
So if you want a copy of their complete report, I've read it. It's not hard going. It's pretty clear. You're writing the Missoula Local Government Study Commission, Box 7551, Missoula 59802. They have voicemail. You should see that voicemail 5234868. And they check it twice daily. But why should we become a self-governing city? What powers will we have that we don't have now? Why is it a good idea?
Well, it's not an easy question to answer in terms of giving you some specifics that are going to change life in the community as people know it overnight. When we did our study of the differences between general government powers and general government powers and self-government powers, we found that since it was enacted by the Convention in '72 and the subsequent adoption, that the state of Montana has thrown a pretty strong fence around the areas in which local governments with self-government powers can operate. And there are clearly areas of interest that are state interest and not local interest. So we've endeavored very diligently to find examples of self-government powers and how that could change things. One example that we did find that I think is kind of interesting is the city of Billings has used some very innovative record-keeping techniques, and they're using all very modern technology in terms of optical scanners, laser discs, and so on, to be able to store their public records. That does a variety of things. One, of course, for citizens, it makes it much easier to retrieve and have access to public documents. Anybody with a PC and a modem can get this stuff. The law that governs general government powers right now specifies that general government powers retain those documents on microfilm and microfiche, and those kinds of mechanisms, while they are dependable, are very cumbersome to use, and it is very difficult for citizens particularly to get access to documents. It usually involves a staff person's time to find the document, copy it, charge the citizen for it, so on and so forth. Billings has solved that problem because they're not constrained by that particular part of the law. I think perhaps the thing that Missoula should look at, and what we hope the voters will pay attention to, is that as the Commission did its work, we saw self-government powers as forming the foundation for the future of government in Missoula. There are a great number of challenges facing the local government now, as everyone knows, particularly in the area of growth and so on. Self-government powers will help the city innovate local solutions to these local problems. So there's not a big difference right now, but we see in the future the potential is there, and that self-government powers creates the foundation for those changes.
McCarthy, if I can add to that, right now there's basically about 4 policy areas wherein a local government is expressly prohibited from enacting any kind of powers. Those basically are any kind of powers that might affect issues non-local government. I mean, they're outside, more statewide types of issues that we would not be empowered to enact those types of things. Secondly, taxation issues, things involving, say, the environment, anything like EPA regulated, the local government, Missoula, would not be able to, for example, change the water quality standard, that type of thing. And fourth, there's things that deal with, say, public employee pensions, workers' compensation, public schools, larger issues that, again, affect statewide issues that we're prohibited from. And there's powers that were expressly prohibited from touching, and those are laid out in Title VII of the Montana Code Annotated. I believe it's Chapter 1, Section 1.1, and also those that we have the power of taking on, but they have to be delegated by the state. So that provides us more leeway. And just to reiterate real quickly what Geoff stated, it's the idea behind this that we're excited about, although granted the state has basically limited severely self-government powers at this immediate point. The whole power and purpose behind it, I think, that the Constitution initially saw was that it allows each local community to enact powers specific to that community, whereas, you know, on a statewide level, it's hard to make sure that a particular community's needs are appropriately assessed and decisions made from that assessment.
Geoff, maybe you could put the ballot language up, or whatever you think is
Sure.
appropriate at this time. And this is the literal language that will appear on the ballot. What cities in Montana have, their own the greater self-governing powers?
Actually, all Class 1 cities in the state of Montana, of which Missoula is one, it's having a population, I believe it's above 45,000.
10,000.
10,000, excuse me. So Missoula is basically one of the only large cities remaining that doesn't have self-government powers. And in this review period that we're in, communities all across the state of Montana have been involved, and many have already kind of wrapped up their decision-making process and put it forward to the voters. And self-government powers have been enacted in some of those other communities as well. So it's fairly a popular idea that has been well received.
Specifically, Helena has a charter, Billings, Great Falls.
Can you give me an example from one of those cities of something that they've done, another example that would be clearer perhaps in people's minds than the scanning and record-keeping business, that they have done that we couldn't do if we wanted to?
To be honest with you, I don't think I can.
Right. I mean, because don't I understand correctly that, for example, if we had the self-governing powers, that we would be able to, let's say, own a water company or a utility?
Right. Well,
we couldn't do that now.
Well, local governments can, in fact, own those utilities and do. Missoula, of course, is distinct in the state in that we don't own our water system. But in terms of things that they've done, when the Constitutional Convention opened the door for local government innovation, I think their intent was for local governments to be a laboratory across the state, to try different things, to experiment. And I would say right now in the state's history, local governments are still experimenting with this. And I have to be honest with you and your viewers, there have been some false starts. The city of Helena, for example, tried under its self-government powers to enact fire service fees. And that, under the scrutiny of the Attorney General, proved to be unworkable, and they had to abandon that idea. So there's been some experimentation, but not a great deal of success.
All right, you talked about, you used the word laboratory, that that there was this feeling that, we should always be, testing new ideas and new things. Well, clearly also on the ballot then, one of the recommendations that you've come up with for the voters to consider and vote up or down, and I'm sure you'll be clarifying those, and that is to say this business of neighborhood councils and the community council. And I think the viewers will appreciate that. So there's the major issue on the ballot: should we become a self-governing charter form of city government.
Right.
Okay. If that passes, then there are two sub-options also on the ballot, which we'll
Yes.
be looking at. But even if those sub-options are passed by a majority of the voters, they will not go into effect unless a majority of the voters have also approved the self-governing charter.
Right, and that's specified by state law. We're pretty much limited in not only our scope of review, but also the whole review process and what we're able to put forth to the voters.
We'll probably try to explain that a couple of times tonight because it's a concept that takes a little bit of consideration to fully grasp. You did a good job.
I
You do the
think
talking.
people will be getting that good, but we will remind. But let's talk about the neighborhood councils in the community. I mean, that's a new one for all of us, you know. And do I understand correctly, Helena has neighborhood councils?
That's correct.
And is that actually part of the city government, their neighborhood
They're
councils?
included in their
Yes,
charter.
they're
Okay,
recognized.
so, all right, good, thanks.
And it's not really such a new idea. Well, last year, in 1995, City of Missoula strategic plan emphasized as one of its primary tasks was greater responsibility to and accessibility to its local community members. And that's something that we have heard time and time again. As you indicated in your introductions, we have done extensive research and had a lot of different opportunities to talk to not only local citizens, but local employees, people who have been involved in review sessions before, and experts in the field of political science. And it was evident from all of these conversations that what perhaps was the biggest need in Missoula was greater accessibility to and responsiveness from the City of Missoula. And that's what we're hoping the Neighborhood Council will provide.
Right, and reading your report, if the self-government charter passes, and if, let's say, the neighborhood council's sub-option also passed, then the instruction to the city government is that by what date? That they'd have to then, the city council itself, working with whomever, would have to determine and write out the structure of the neighborhood councils. Is that right?
Right. They're given a deadline, I believe it's 1 year, to complete all the work necessary to study neighborhood councils and to draft the requisite ordinances, to start them up and get them going. We took a stab at it. The commission tried to imagine ourselves how neighborhood councils should be set up. And we found it was a very provocative discussion, very engaging discussion, but very complex.
Right.
What we were able to come up with was that our recommendation is that a neighborhood council be organized in such a way as to be purely a democratic situation, that no one in a neighborhood, for example, would be excluded by virtue of whether they owned or rented, so on and so forth. And we said that one of the other things that had to happen was that neighborhood councils had to have bylaws so people could understand how to participate in their neighborhood council. But other than that, we pretty much tried to keep hands off because it was too big a job for us to do.
Right.
And too important, right. It's too important to be looked at in such a brief period of time.
But just to complete this little part of the picture, then the community, speak to us about the community council part of it. In other words, so let's say if everything passes and the city government is then considering also the details of how the neighborhood councils would work and set up, and we write the ordinance, and there would also be that part kind of, I don't have a good grasp on where the community council fits in there, even as you discussed it.
Basically, from each neighborhood council, there would be either one or two representatives from each neighborhood that would be sitting or acting on this community council, which would provide a whole community-wide discussion group, and the interesting thing about that is we had a lot of discussion about at-large versus ward representation, and this in some ways almost provides that at-large representation so that people can get outside of their own neighborhoods, their own issues, their own economic setting, and really see what's going on in Missoula as a whole, and that we thought would be a really important feature of this, and also advise, the city council on.
I was going to say, it further extends this idea of laboratory, that what one neighborhood might be doing could be used in another. A great example of that just took place last week in the form of a neighborhood that got together with the school children in its neighborhood and city forces and volunteers to create the Peary Park Trail up in the South Hills. Tremendous expression of neighborhood spirit and drive, and they did something that now can be mimicked throughout the community. The same thing could be true with these neighborhood councils, solving their neighborhood problems and showing other neighborhoods how to do it.
All right, so hypothetically then, if everything passed, we'd finally, a year and a half from now, we'd have neighborhood councils throughout the city, and in some way those neighborhood councils would choose or elect one or two or three amongst their number from their neighborhood council, who would then become part of this other body called the community council, which would then serve to advise the city and the city council as to X, Y, or Z.
Exactly.
Right, advisory only.
Advisory only. What have there been doubts expressed about whether, I'm someone who in the past, and people are delighted to be able to go up to the microphone at City Hall as an individual, or sometimes as an individual, speaking for some sympathetic people. Has there been concern expressed there that would somehow fade,
Not really, but in answer to that, this is not by any means an attempt to cut out any other type of access to city government. It's to allow another type of tool. A lot of the people that came and spoke to us about their concern of local government participation was that the only times that they were actually able to speak was at city council meetings, which a lot of people just either they don't have time for or they don't feel comfortable speaking in public, or they felt it was too late. It was basically they were just being paid lip service and the decision was already made. And so that was something we hoped to somewhat remedy by the proposal of neighborhood councils.
That issue was directly addressed in the charter. We did put in a provision that says neighborhood councils and the community council shall not preclude any individual or individuals from access to or participation with the city council, the mayor, or city departments. We recognize that there is absolutely nothing about a community council or a city council or a neighborhood council or a community council that can abrogate a person's right to address their government. That's fundamental.
I want to move quickly so that we get this phone ringing here. Now, these are recommendations, as I understand it, from your report. There's nothing to do with the ballot that we'll be voting on. But the study commission, you folks, 7 of you, right, recommend that the city council, Missoula City Council, review the position, duties, and qualifications of the city treasurer and consider making this an appointed position rather than, as at present, an elected position. And in conversations, I believe, with John Baldridge, as you suggested, this in no way, throws an unfavorable light on the person holding that position now. It's, in your view, it's a question of efficiency. Could you just take a quick elaboration on that one?
Right. A lot of the basis for that recommendation came from looking at other local governments throughout Montana. The performance of the person that's presently in that position was never called into question. In fact, he's doing a wonderful job.
Right.
I think it's pretty much unanimous. But, what happens when he leaves? There really isn't any guarantee of getting someone in who may have his current level of knowledge or experience. And in looking at other communities, that position is no longer...
Meaning, for example, that McCarthy Coyle could run for treasurer with no expertise with money at all and be elected, right?
You have a great sounding name, so that might get you in. I mean, who knows?
No, but I mean, isn't that partly the subtext there that someone running for office may not have all the qualifications that they needed, but but they were popular and were elected.
If you think
Right.
about it, the city is a municipal corporation with a $25 million a year operating budget, and it seemed to us as we thought about it that the person who's accounting for the coming and going of the funds for that corporation perhaps ought to have some expertise, and those duties ought to be examined just to make sure that we're being as responsible as we can.
And I want to make clear to the viewers that that was an underlined recommendation in your completed
Exactly.
report, that this needs to be looked at. You
Right.
believe the city really needs to look at this. And you also recommended, again, not for the ballot, that the city council take steps to decrease council involvement in the day-to-day tasks which are best left with the city's professional staff and administrators, and work to strengthen the council's ability to engage in policy making, productive policy making. You want to take a wing on that one? Either one?
You might be able to speak best to that, given your participation in a lot of city council meetings. They just go on and on and on, and I doubt the city council members, much less the people that go there to speak on a specific issue, appreciate that. And although what the council is engaging in is legitimate exercise of their legislative power, it's...
Are you talking about the kind of thing where, because so often I'll hear someone come in and they want to widen their driveway, or they want to, do some, perhaps, they need a variance, right? Whether they're building an extension on their garage, and is that the kind of thing? I mean, would that be an example where, therefore, the city council does have to take the time, and the professional staff is still involved, but is that the kind of thing that might?
A good example, I think, that anybody in Missoula would probably recognize, and that's with our zoning ordinances.
Right.
A hodgepodge of ordinances that have been cobbled together over the years. And if you look at the amount of time that the council spends on deliberating land use issues, particularly in this litigious society, right now the city is subject to a lawsuit over a land use issue. If the council were able to take up with the whole question of land use and settle these issues at a policy level, they would be freed up to do other policy work instead of having to spend meetings. I mean, these people spend sometimes they're till after midnight, and we certainly don't pay them enough to make them do that. That was one example. City council, elected people, are always going to try to provide constituent service, and that's part of their job. Is there a line at which constituent service, you step over that line and you become meddling or micromanaging? I think that's a possibility, and I think we always have to be alert to that.
All right, let's go to the last big item, which is also one of the sub-options on the ballot. We got the sub-options coming up here. Can we get a shot of that, please? So this will be on the ballot as well, the June 4th ballot, and these are the sub-options. And we're getting into the area of, do the voters want to keep the present system in which we elect our public officials on a partisan basis, whether that's Democrat, Republican, or Reform, or Libertarian, or whatever, or do we want to go to a nonpartisan election system? Again, the viewers should know that unless they also pass the self-governing charter, even if they don't approve the self-government charter, that even if you approve one of these sub-options, it will not go into action.
That's correct.
Right.
Now, tell us more about this partisan, nonpartisan business.
Well, first of all, before we begin on that, the only elected officials we're talking about in this case are either city council members, the mayor, or the city treasurer. So there's really only three different positions that we're talking about that would be impacted by this sub-option.
So the council, the mayor, and the city treasurer as it stands now. Okay. And so how did this evolve? Your conclusion and your recommendation that this should be a sub-option.
The reason it was put on as a sub-option is because the commission itself didn't really feel strongly about it, so as to include it in the charter. When we conducted our survey, however, 60% of the respondents said they favored nonpartisan elections for municipal offices. And indeed, across the state of Montana and across the country, 89–90% of municipal elections are conducted on a nonpartisan basis.
Throughout the whole country,
Yes.
90% of municipal?
I think it was 89.6%. So in that sense, Missoula's situation is an anomaly compared to the rest of the country. We heard testimony going both directions on this. Missoula is clearly a political town and a town that loves its politics. There's just no question about that. Our thought on making this a sub-option was to say, if the survey indicates that a majority want this, let's take it one step further and test it at the ballot booth. I don't think that there was any strong feeling one way or another among the commission to do away with political parties. It's just that the people indicated that this is what they wanted, and we'll give them a chance to do it if they really do want it.
What was the I wanted to ask you, when you say, thanks for bearing with my stutter. What other cities in Missoula have nonpartisan elections?
In Montana?
Yeah, in Montana.
Bozeman, for example,
Bozeman.
is a nonpartisan
Okay. Is that pretty much the only one in
no.
Montana?
Billings.
Smaller Billings? Billings as
For
well?
example.
Okay.
Great Falls.
Great Falls, okay, all right. And let's see, I think we've got a call coming in. All right. Hello, you're on the air.
I am.
All right, do you have a question for the commissioners?
I just wanted to say that McCarthy, I just thought that was a really cool name.
Oh, thanks. Is that it?
Hello?
Yeah, do you have a further question? Hello? Easy. All right. What was the hardest part of your work, and what was your budget?
Hardest part of our work probably was getting a good enough handle on the issues to go out and actually talk to people about them. None of us have been or held posts, on these specific issues before. All of us were just, 7 people in the city of Missoula that wound up being elected, and we're thankful for that, for getting the chance to be further educated on local government issues and be involved in this community process.
But this was a no-pay.
Right.
No-pay job.
Right.
And then you did have a budget for doing surveys,
expenditures,
getting professional assistance, etc.
Our work was originally funded by the City Council our first year when we started, because this has gone into 2 fiscal years. Our first year's budget was $64,000. We didn't come anywhere close to paying that or using that up. And in our second year, our budget was $60,000, and again, we're nowhere close to paying that. I think the commissioners all feel pretty proud of the fact that we're going to turn back money to the city when we're done, to the tune of several $1,000s.
Right, and as you stated earlier, we did hire a coordinator, which proved to be indispensable. Although he didn't participate in any of the decision-making issues or that type of thing, the function of coordinating speaking engagements, TV programs, helping us, prepare copies, work with the Missoulian, research, was indispensable, since all of us have, full-time day jobs.
Do I understand that there's some concern from some parts of the community that self-governing powers, if the charter were to pass, that people are worried that there will be increased opportunities for taxation for possibly potentially higher?
No, again, basically, taxation is one of the things that a local government is prohibited from changing with self-government powers. I believe sales tax, and there's one other type of tax that can be delegated by the state, but again, that has to be a process in which the state approves that delegation. So that's something that we're not able to
Originally,
change.
from an historical perspective, self-governing powers, cities, the law was not clear on that question, and there was some belief at the time that the voters and the citizens of Montana passed I-105 that self-government powers would be exempt from that. And indeed, an attorney general's opinion was issued at the time, which spoke to that very clearly and said, no, self-government powers, general government powers, cities, local governments are bound by I-105.
Right.
We addressed that also in the charter because there was some concern in our discussions, well, what if I-105 went away? Well, I think it's safe to presume that if I-105 went away through legislative action, that some other form of revenue to fund local government would take its place. But if that weren't the case, if they just said, okay, the cap is gone, what we did to assure the people of Missoula that they would still be treated as a general government power with all those restrictions as it pertains to taxation, we specifically said that the city of Missoula shall not increase its authority for levying local property taxes beyond that which general government governments have, except with a vote of the people. So in other words, by adopting this charter, the people of Missoula, even though they get self-government powers, their situation with respect to the government's ability to raise property taxes will not change without their vote.
I want to get back to the partisan, nonpartisan. As you folks met in a group, I assume there wasn't always unanimity, but why have so many communities around the country chosen nonpartisan forms of, electing officials for local government, and what, in your view, is good about it?
I just wonder, I think, and this is a question that a lot of people asked, is really what role does partisan elections have on a local government level? Does it really have a large impact? And the resounding answer was no, and I think we've seen that from other communities in their decision to go with nonpartisan elections, was that it really didn't have that large of an impact.
On the other hand, and the reason why this wasn't such a clear issue for the commission, partisan politics have a good side.
Mm-hmm.
They recruit candidates, they help candidates get elected, they provide an identification for voters, they help provide the cutting ground for future elected officials. And so, it's not a clear thing, good or bad, but we'll let the voters decide.
Okay, we got a call here. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I was just wondering what you thought about the Watergate scandal.
It's not our topic for tonight. We're on Missoula local city government. We got some youngsters out there.
Yes, they're watching.
What did it come up? And I asked this question recently. Or let's say we went to nonpartisan elections. In your discussions, or informal, or whatever, what would happen to the parties then, let's say, that are interested in local government? Would they? I assume that we would still see endorsements and backings for a nonpartisan candidate, or that there would be no prohibition against that. But I don't know.
I can't imagine that there would be a prohibition against it. I think what is the case in most of those kind of elections is that the candidates' names, as they appear on the ballot, would not have a party label attached with them.
And and again, you're asking voters to consider this business of the neighborhood council and the community council. When you talked about this, and people must have said, well, how big will a neighborhood council be, and how far will it extend? Is there any way that we can at least have an imaginary picture of how Missoula might look? I know you're not suggesting a plan for that, but is there some way you can help us get a grasp on that?
Well, we haven't actually designated any boundaries, and that's why we want to have a commission do this. But, for example, just look at the existing ward boundaries. That's an example of designated boundaries that basically fill up the city of Missoula. And we didn't touch on this earlier, and I would just like to add, with regards to neighborhood councils, one of the other features that we hope might come out of that is that there's a lot of education going on at the neighborhood level. You have a lot of people that there's a majority of Missoulians who aren't involved in local politics on a regular basis, and a small group that are very involved, and we're hoping that those people can kind of help educate and involve people in their neighborhood, and therefore there's kind of a higher level of local government involvement as a result of this process.
Aren't we? I was asking John Baldridge, you know, you're a professional staff consultant, about. Aren't we? I mean, the city has grown in numbers through annexation. So aren't some of the wards out of whack now in terms of don't lines have to be redrawn soon, or?
Actually, the lines are redrawn on a periodic basis, and that's a function of state law and in fulfillment of the one person, one vote representation doctrine that's come from the Supreme Court.
Hello, have you got a question?
Do you think Dan Kimmis is doing a good job?
Are you asking us personally, or?
Well, all I can say is he hasn't been thrown out of office yet. So I think the you know, so far the citizens seem to be. He has his critics, like most public officials do. Do you have a question about how you would like to see city government proceed on a nonpartisan or partisan basis?
No, that's okay.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I don't know who's out there tonight. Come on, folks, give us a hand. There were other things that came up, and I don't know how far you want to get into this. You know, when we get, I guess one of the other models that you considered quite a bit was the, you know, where you hire a professional administrator. What's that called? The
City manager.
City manager. I mean, you'd still have a mayor, right? Under that, conceivably.
Typically, it's in those situations, it's a ceremonial role more than anything else.
I see. I see.
Perhaps the chairman of whatever legislative body the mayor would have that function as well.
Right.
But city manager would be responsible.
And am I correct to get the impression from maybe between the lines or in the lines of your report that, I mean, that you folks really did give this serious consideration, and that it has its, you know, strong points, but that you didn't finally think that in the Missoula environment as a political entity and as we have lived our civic lives so far, that that I'll let you finish that up.
The past history of having city managers in Missoula hasn't been too successful, and people have a very long memory, and that's something that kept coming back to us in all of our meetings. Initially, we did look hard at the idea of having a city manager because a lot of other large cities in Montana have them and have had successful city managers, but I believe it was 1974. There was one prior, I think it was 1956.
It was in the 50s.
Yeah, that there was a city manager. And again, just like a mayor, they have personalities, and depending on how those fall out, it's what people remember. But there were definitely advantages to having a city manager as well as disadvantages, but I think that the baseline for our decision was that really the council-mayor form of government in Missoula appears to be working properly. There weren't a whole lot of complaints in that area.
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, my question is in regards to the city police or law enforcement and government, and what are the plans of city officials to allocate more funds with this burgeoning city? Obviously, we're going to have more social problems in the future with the population going up, so what are the plans of each ward to maybe add or, you know, gain more funding for that type of program?
I can answer that. In my function as a city department head, was recently involved in the city's annual budget review. And your question, the listener's question about growth is a good one. As a result of the recent annexations and the growth that we've had, the city has provided additional police officers, and in the coming year, in the budget that is going to be before the council in the next month or so, additional police resources are being provided. In addition, one of the things that our police department is doing, which I think is very innovative, is that they're working on a concept called community policing, which are trying to get police officers out into the community, working with the neighbors, working with the people, rather than responding as a crime-fighting, apprehend the bad guys force. Get out, work with kids, work with neighborhoods, help them be involved in policing in order to carry the taxpayer's dollar a little bit further and make policing work. So,
Caller, how's that?
Yes, well, I am interested in that. How would I get involved if I wanted to help the police with a situation like that? Say, working with the youth to keep them off the streets and safe and our neighborhoods, healthy, happy places.
I would simply suggest that you call the Missoula City Police Department to learn more about their community policing, the DARE program. There's quite a number of opportunities for citizens and volunteers to get involved with that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey, thanks for calling in.
All right, you have a good night.
Thanks. What main things have we, we haven't, what main things haven't we gotten to that you think it's important that the folks out there know? Or
What main things?
well, you can think about that. We got another caller.
Okay.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, I'm interested in, like, Missoula government.
And what would you like to ask?
I want to ask how you could go about, like, getting on the board.
You mean this? You mean this local government study commission?
Yeah.
Well, they're just finishing up their labors after about 18 months. Are you going out of business after the election? Is that how that works, or?
Yeah,
Will be done.
that's the thing.
Right. And
Another opportunity in 10 years,
10
perhaps.
years.
What?
every 10 years, we have the opportunity to review our local forms of government and make any recommendations for changes.
Oh, all
So-
right. So I'll be 24.
All right.
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff here, man.
Count on it.
Way to go.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
In answer to your question, we've addressed the issue so far of citizen participation, elections. As you said in your introduction, the topic of consolidation was something that we as a local government commission weren't able to consider simply because the county did not opt for a review commission. So we weren't really able to look into that or to recommend that. I'm trying to think of what else. There's an awful lot in 2 years' worth that came up, believe me.
All right, let's go over before we we've got a little time yet, but let's go over the basics on the ballot.
This will be the main question that people will be looking at, and it's an important thing. I welcome the opportunity to explain this. Our issue is going to appear on the reverse side of people's ballots. So the viewers should know that when you're in the ballot booth, turn your ballot over, because that's where our question that we'll have will appear. The first issue, and this is our principal option,
Right.
is to vote for the adoption of the charter that the Local Government Study Commission has prepared, which will allow Missoula to have self-government powers. And this document also outlines the powers, structures, and the limits on local government. And their voters' choice will be to adopt the charter or to retain what we have now. And that's the main question that the voters will be confronted with. We'll have two sub-options, the first being whether or not to have municipal elections conducted on a nonpartisan or partisan basis.
Right.
And again, the sub-options can only be enacted if the main question of the charter gets adopted. The second sub-option that the voters will be confronted with is whether or not the city council should create neighborhood councils and a community council to advise the city council, the mayor, and department heads, city officials, on issues of either a neighborhood or citywide basis. So the provision that we drafted in our charter for that question will be, shall it be included or shall not be included.
Right. And I think it's important, again, we've said this before, but that probably wisely enough, if the voters approve all of those measures, then you've turned that job over to the city council of trying to figure out and put together what the structure of the neighborhood council and the community council, how it's going to work. It sounds like a big job.
It is a big job. We have a lot of research materials that we can pass on to that group. If the voters choose to do this, we'll certainly have a lot of help for them.
Do you believe in neighborhood councils?
Personally?
Yeah.
The research that we've done has indicated that where they work well, they're a valuable part of government, and they are really helpful in, as Amy said, engaging citizens to be involved in government. Where they are not set up well, or where people don't participate, evidence suggests that they are burdensome, cumbersome, and tend to get in the way.
Right. So what if we passed all this, and 3 years from now, the whole city was, up and disgusted with neighborhood councils. They weren't working. What's our escape route? Do we have one?
Sure, it would be part of the charter, so you would have the capability of amending the charter.
I see. So these two, the sub-options, would become
be
part of the charter, and then because we had the self-governing powers under the charter, then we could say, all right, we're going to eliminate neighborhood councils, or we're going to change what we wrote about them 2 years ago.
Or any other aspect of the charter could also be amended in the same way.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of a personal question.
Yeah.
Both times when you reference neighborhood councils, you preface that with this business of, so I was taking that you're not too keen on the idea of having neighborhood
it's
councils.
just a figure of speech, nothing implied, nothing intended, no, just the process of neighborhood councils, because it is hard to, I know the philosophy of it, but to try and picture how it's constructed so that it does run smoothly.
Right.
Go ahead.
There are examples where it has run smoothly, and that was something that we kept coming back to. It's not some new Missoula concoction that we've cooked up, Seattle, Helena, Bellingham, and we really want to make sure there's sufficient time taken because we are not a Seattle or a Bellingham, so we want to make sure that this is something that will work and not be
How does Helena seem to be doing with them?
Well, very well. There's endorsements from the city manager of Helena. Actually, the Chamber of Commerce has endorsed their neighborhood councils, so...
you mean in Helena, the Helena Chamber of Commerce has gotten behind, they like the way it's working?
Yeah, it was a rocky road. I mean, and no one should expect that this stuff emerges full-blown and perfect. It takes work. Government takes constant work.
And while we have a lot of, this was another document that you folks had prepared, and I just wanted to just very quickly, the camera is having a difficult time with this one in particular, but under the present form of government in Missoula, we have general powers, only those authorized by state and federal law. Under the form of government, the charter that's going to be on the ballot, we would have self-government powers and all powers not prohibited by state or federal law.
So that basically includes general powers plus any others not prohibited.
And your own comment on that in terms of your language is that the city has greater authority to solve local problems. Again, we went over the partisan versus non-partisan elections, and we did cover the community councils, and right now we have none.
Right. McCarthy, perhaps the most fun feature of writing the charter, or drafting it, was we got to work on the preamble, and since none of us are poets by any means, we thought it would be fun to involve local high schools, especially the government classes, and have them participate in writing preambles as well as people throughout the community. So that was really kind of a fun exercise.
Great. And what was the, how did the surveys get designed?
The survey.
Here's a question that's more important.
Okay.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I have a question about Mayor Kempis' policies concerning, like, city streets.
All right.
Okay, what's his ideas of like the two sides of like paved roads like outside of Missoula like that? You know, because it could lead to overpopulation and stuff like that.
Could you restate that a little bit? I was thrown off by the unpaved roads and the greater population. You mean?
Hello?
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to like think about it. Okay, I'm not real bright.
Well,
So-
no. I mean, I'm getting the drift. Did you have a handle on that?
Well, just a quick answer. Since the mayor is the mayor of the city of Missoula, it seemed like you were referencing issues outside of the city. That would be more something for the county commissioners to address, I think, than Mayor Kemmis.
Oh, really? Okay, so who would I want to ask?
If it's outside the city, then you go to the 3 county commissioners in the county
And
courthouse.
also Horace Brown, who is the county surveyor, an elected official.
An elected official, Horace Brown, the surveyor.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm really interested in it, so I'll make a couple of calls and stuff,
All right.
and find out that stuff, dude.
Thanks a lot.
Green Sox rule, baby.
All right. Go ahead, Green
Must be
Sox.
you.
I knew I couldn't get away with that. But that's triggering something here. As we look at our development and as we look at our growth, right? Because the study commission also, I forget, I had it marked someplace, but you talked
We
about
recognize that as the #1 problem
right,
facing
that
Missoula.
growth and strategic planning, or am I miscuing that one? But growth, and that I think the commission, you folks felt that having a self-governing charter would allow us to move in a more efficient way towards dealing with these problems of growth. Is that right? Could you just give us an example or two of some specifics that we don't have the power to do now that we would have? I think people need concrete pictures, or I do.
You're absolutely right, and as we said earlier, that's a very difficult issue to deal with. Land use regulations are, for the most part, directed by the state, and the state has reserved jurisdiction over a great many land use questions. I think more importantly, what I think the charter addresses and what self-government powers address for the community is a reclaiming that this is our government, that this is where we solve our problems, and it's perhaps a clarion call to the elected officials if the voters approve this, without those concrete examples that you asked for, that they are to redirect their efforts towards solving these problems and to help innovate and find the ways to make self-government powers more meaningful. As we said earlier, this charter is the foundation. It's not the conclusion, it's the beginning. And it's what we're going to build on over the next 10 years. If we don't adopt this charter now, we'll wait 10 years and take the opportunity to do it all over again. I think, just to conclude that thought, Missoula's had 2 opportunities to review its local government in the past, and what's been presented to the voters, both occasions was voted down. We, in reviewing the information from those elections and from our surveys, we concluded Missoulians didn't want a major change. We've given them something that is familiar to them and workable and progressive.
Usable.
And usable, yeah.
And as Geoff has indicated, although the legislature right now is fairly limited in terms of allowing self-government powers, there's nothing to say that that won't change. So by adopting self-government powers now, instead of waiting 10 whole more years until we're able to approach the issue again, unless it's done through initiative or petition, there's lobbying, there's a lot of efforts that can be made to kind of loosen some of this state stronghold on issues that really local governments would like to have under their control.
We've got about 90 seconds to wrap it up because we've got a judge from the Montana Supreme Court waiting to be on the air, so we can't hold the judge up. I wonder, have you had any major endorsements by folks in the community or organizations or people at City Hall? Or I mean, are there people out there now saying, I'm going to vote for this charter? And
Definitely.
You know,
First people out of the chute was the Chamber of Commerce, endorsed the charter itself. They took a different stand on the sub-option issues.
okay.
But they were the first.
League of Women Voters.
League of Women Voters.
Mhm.
We had some tentative endorsement at our later public hearings from the new party about the idea of the charter. Again, people seem to feel comfortable with the idea of the charter. The sub-options seem to be where most of the political dialogue is going to occur.
Right. And so we should also say, as a kind of reverse way into this, that even though people reject the sub-options, they can still have the self-government charter option.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most important thing, McCarthy, is for people to get familiar about the issue and to vote.
Right.
That's what we're looking for, is people to be informed and involved.
Right.
June 4th.
And June 4th, and you've got, and your report is available at the library, at City Hall, I take
Right, at
it?
the city clerk's office.
And people can get their own copy, and they can track you down.
And finally, if they want to call, if they want to call our voicemail number or write to us or contact John Baldridge, our coordinator, they can also be given a copy.
Okay, good. It's the Missoula Local Government Study Commission, Box 7551, Missoula 59802.
It should be 807.
It
It says 02, but it should be 07.
Sorry, 59807, the good old downtown post office
That's
zip
correct.
number. And you can call them on their voicemail at 523-4868. And I really appreciate your coming down. Thanks for running for these positions. Thanks for doing the work on an unpaid basis. And I enjoyed reading your report. I found it substantially clear. I had to take my time with it, but I think it's the kind of document that most of us could get through and see what your major points are. And like those other recommendations that you made in terms of greater efficiency at City Hall, that won't be on the ballot. So, I mean, there's more to your report than simply, leading us up to this ballot. So, thanks for your work, and we'll see how the election falls out. Thanks
Thank
very
you
much
very
for
much.
being
Thank
here.
you, McCarthy.
Yep. Stay tuned. We've got Judge Chip Erdmann of the Montana Supreme Court, and I'll let you two come unglued.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, you can go right out through there. The cameras won't bite. That's fine. We won't need that. Yeah. Welcome. Welcome. You know how to get one of those tools on?
I think I can get these on.
All right, thanks. Oh. Somebody nailed me for my green socks. I knew I should have changed to business socks. You're watching a public conversation on Missoula Community Access Television, and we appreciate the fact that Judge Charles Erdmann, you generally go by Chip. I mean that's what your friends and family call you. That's
Most people call me
a
Chip. That's
nickname
correct.
all your life. And on the show a couple of weeks ago, we had James Regnier, who's running for the seat that you're now sitting in.
Yes.
Is that right? And let me get my papers together, please. Thank you. Justice Erdmann was appointed to the Montana Supreme Court last year to fill the seat of a judge who had resigned before his term was complete. And Judge Erdmann was selected by Governor Roscoe from a field of 5 names submitted by the Judicial Nomination Commission. This is a nonpartisan position, and Judge Erdmann wants voters to keep him on the court now for a full term. Voters could choose to replace Justice Erdmann with James Regnier, a Missoula attorney. Justice Erdmann was born in Great Falls. You'll be 50 years old next month. You served in the Marine Corps, and you hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Montana Air National Guard.
Correct.
You graduated from the University of Montana School of Law in 1975 and went to work right away as an Assistant Attorney General for the state of Montana. and then you became the chief counsel for the state auditor's office, and then you later returned to the Attorney General's office as chief attorney for the Antitrust Enforcement Bureau. Later, you were selected to start the Montana Medicaid Fraud Bureau, and you left state government in 1982 and became the attorney for the Montana School Boards Association. And in 1986, you went into private legal practice.
That's correct.
Right. How much money do you expect to be spending on this campaign?
Well, that's an interesting question. As you're aware, there was an initiative last year or last election that significantly changed the way that funds are raised for campaigns. And for instance, in the last campaign cycle, when there was a race for Supreme Court, the contribution limits were $750 per individual. The reform that went through has lowered that to $200 per individual. So it's very difficult to assess based on historical practices how much is going to be expended. I would guess that this is going to be a race where my campaign will spend around $100,000 from beginning to end.
And have you always believed in, or have you ever expressed reservations about the election of judges versus appointment of judges?
Well, first of all, that was a subject of debate in the 1972 Constitutional Convention, and there are a lot of states that have an appointment of judges, and then those individual judges come up for either confirmation or removal from office from time to time by the voters. But the framers of the Constitution felt that, with Montana's heritage of electing judges, that should continue. It's difficult to campaign as a judge because obviously we can't speak about issues that are before the court or that could come before the court because we can't prejudge cases. So it makes it difficult for us to campaign. But as I go around the state, I find that people appreciate the opportunity to meet the candidates, to shake our hands, to look us in the eye and get a measure of it.
How many decisions have you written on the court? How long you've been on there? How long now?
Since last September.
September. And how many decisions have you written, more or less?
I think it's right around, since I've been on, probably 36 or 37.
In which you were the chief author of the
Yes.
decision. And how many dissents were you, more or less?
Of those, I would probably say maybe 5 or 6 dissents.
Mm-hmm. And what would be one of the cases and decisions that the Supreme Court made in Montana that would be, let's say, most familiar to the citizenry?
Of the cases that I've decided?
Yeah.
Or that I've...
In general, in your term on the court.
Well, I can certainly tell you that as we go around the state, the questions that we get asked the most are about the criminal cases because they're the easiest for individuals to identify with. They're probably not the more significant cases from a legal perspective, but they're the ones that get the most headlines. Certainly, the case that's been commented on more than any case since I've been on the court was the Supreme Court's decision in the intoxication defense, where the court held, or at least the Attorney General felt that the court held, that intoxication is a defense in a criminal charge. And of course, that was the case the Attorney General took to the U.S. Supreme Court and argued. That was decided before I got on the court, but as I go around the state, that is the case that most questions are asked about.
Are you far enough now removed from your work for the Montana School Boards Association, or do you ever, would there be cases coming before the court where you might have to recuse yourself and not participate?
Well, I haven't worked for the actual Montana School Boards Association since 1986, so I think that any cases that they're involved with I wouldn't have a conflict with, but like any other attorney who has an active private practice before they go on the court, certainly some of the cases that I was active in and turned over to other attorneys may well come before the court, and in those cases I would certainly recuse myself. And there were, in fact, there was just a case the other day where it came out of Helena, and before I was appointed to the court, I had discussed the case with the attorneys for both sides because it was an area that I had an interest in. And when that came up to the court, I recused myself because of the potential conflict.
Have you expressed an opinion on creating a new federal judicial district along the lines proposed by Senator Burns, in which Montana would, move out of the 9th federal district, and we'd have a new district of Montana, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Alaska?
I don't know if I've publicly stated a position on that, and that is something that's, outside the scope certainly of the state judiciary, but I do have a personal opinion on that. And, I think that that's an area that should be looked at very closely, and there may be some merit in pursuing that. And I don't buy the reason that you hear most of the time. I mean, a lot of the time we hear the reason that well, the Ninth Circuit is dominated by liberal California judges, and they shouldn't be sitting and deciding on Montana questions. Well, that's the way the federal system was set up. That there would be a circuit court that wouldn't be dominated by any particular area, and those judges would consider those questions before they went to the Supreme Court. I think the real compelling reason for taking a close look at that is just the number of judges that they have up there right now. And I believe there's 20-some judges on the Ninth Circuit. It is so large that they don't have the ability to meet together. It's my understanding that the last time a federal circuit split, they had fewer judges in that circuit than the Ninth Circuit has now. So I think it's more a question of being able to work in an efficient manner. And my understanding is that Congress has now decided to study that, and I'll be very interested to see the results of that study.
You went to U of M School of Law, and over the past over the past 5 years, and I don't know what the proportion was in your time, but we have about 40% of the graduates from UM Law School now are women, and that figure has kind of held up over the last 5 years. We have one woman on the Supreme Court, and I believe we have 2 district judges in Montana who are women. Do you think that this potentially affects the quality of justice administered, and how would one remedy this seeming imbalance?
Well, and certainly when I went to law school, there was a significant imbalance. And I don't remember what the number was, but certainly the women in our law school class were certainly a distinct minority. And it's been heartening to see that change over the years, and certainly there's some more work to be done in that area. I certainly think that as far as judicial positions are concerned, I'd like to see more women getting involved, both when there are vacancies on the judiciary, applying to the Judicial Nomination Commission, and there were several women that applied when this position came up that I was successful in obtaining. And of course, as far as running for office, that's a personal, individual decision that anybody should make, but I certainly think that Justice Carla Gray is one of our finest justices up there, and we would certainly welcome more women on the court.
We've got a call. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah. I was wondering what the fine is for like painting on streets, because I know this kid named Evan Disney who goes around painting like all the streets. Now they're bloodthirsty, stuff like that. And do you know the fine for that?
I do not know the fine for such a thing.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Nor do I.
All right. Thanks for calling. One thing about public access television, it's accessing the public.
It's accessing the public, yeah.
So they get a chance to join the fun as well.
I would be curious to know what the fine is for painting the street.
I might offer the same question. We're talking about women jurists, and the same question with a subtext in terms of Native American jurists in the Montana civil judiciary. I'm talking about not the tribal courts, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not familiar. Do we have any judges that are Native American?
I don't believe that we do. Not that I'm aware of.
Could you make a comment on that? I mean, we live in a state with that's our most substantial minority.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that needs to be looked at. I know that I practiced a lot in tribal courts and was very impressed with the quality of the individuals that were dealing with the judges and the administrators up there. And there certainly isn't any reason why they shouldn't be moving into the mainstream.
Well, I agree, and frankly, as a citizen, it troubles me at times because we're always, it seems, in the nation struggling to integrate ourselves, not in every way at all times, but to achieve a certain greater equity. And so when you say that's something that needs to be looked at, in my awareness of, let's say, of the federal judicial system, they'll say, well, all right, because there are federal judges that deal on commissions. And they say, well, let's set up a commission and study this and see what could be done. Do we have mechanisms like that in Montana? I mean, do you have? Surely you must have some substantial influence. You're a judge on the Supreme Court. How would one tackle that? How would one look at that and say, is there an equity? Can we do anything about it?
Well, there is a committee that the State Bar has that deals with Indian law and Indian issues, and that may be a place to start to look at that issue. Again, we're talking about a popular election, a public election, and it's certainly heartening to see Bill Yellowtail running for U.S. representative, and those are the kind of I think artificial barriers that need to be broken down in Montana.
You must have given some thought to the question involving the right of a citizen to have her or his case decided by a jury of their peers. In your experience and knowledge, do you believe that minority defendants in Montana adequately receive the fullest opportunity for juries of their peers, and if not, how might this be addressed?
Well, and it's there again, you need to look at the location that, and you're talking about criminal actions. I
hadn't stopped to characterize
okay.
it.
You need to look at the jurisdiction in which it occurred. For instance, if you had a lawsuit or a criminal action that was brought on a jurisdiction that was located on a reservation, then certainly a minority, Native American, is much more likely to get a jury comprised more of Native Americans. However, if that same individual were to bring a lawsuit or have a crime charged against them, I don't know, in Great Falls may be a good example, or even Missoula, where Native Americans are in the minority, the chances of that are significantly less. And, that right now, unfortunately, is the way the system is designed.
I wanted to touch on the fully informed jury movement. And I guess maybe our most recent example of that would be the latest Dr. Kevorkian jury, in which the state believes that it has a just law. In this case, it was a common law. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. But certainly they had other laws on the books covering, these matters that Kevorkian was tried with. And we find that we've got juries that are, in my view and some others' views, are effectively, the juries are saying, we don't think that the law is appropriate.
Yeah.
And this matter of the fully informed jury has certainly gathered, greater press.
Some momentum.
I've read about it in the Wall Street Journal. I've read about it in the New York Times. It's still brewing along. What's your take on this?
Well, it's disturbing from my perspective, and the reason is that in order for our justice system to work, there needs to be some certainty out there. And the certainty that we have in our justice system is the fact that the legislature passes the laws, and then, if somebody is accused of violating the law, that goes to a jury, and the jury determines whether or not the facts of that particular incident, constitute a violation of the law or not. When the jury has the ability or takes it upon themselves to determine what the law should be, not necessarily what it says, but what it should be, you're going to get varying interpretations. And the certainty that society depends upon its laws for is going to be lost. And, that line out there as to what's acceptable behavior and what's not acceptable behavior will start to be blurred. And I think that's a significant concern. And you know, to a certain degree, you can understand the concern of the individuals involved in the fully informed jury movement, but I think from an overall perspective, it causes some real problems as far as society is concerned.
And how's life on the Supreme Court? What's the? You folks have you have a big load of work, right? Isn't that? Don't I hear complaints arise from time to time about the amount of cases and dockets and decisions that have to be made? And
I don't know if you hear complaints. You certainly don't hear complaints from me. The workload is heavy, but it's manageable at this point.
how many? Who helps you? Do you have your own?
We have each justice has 2 law clerks.
Right.
And they help us research and in initial drafting of opinions.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask, when the phone rings, I lose my train of
Yes.
thought a little bit. I think so might have all right. Avi, you have a question for Judge Erdmann?
Yes, I do. I was wondering, Your Honor, if it would be out of place for you to indicate your position on the death penalty in the state of Montana.
Well, you know, whether or not there is a death penalty or not is obviously a legislative prerogative initially, and certainly I think that I wouldn't have any trouble in voting to affirm a decision where the death penalty had been applied if all of the criteria that the legislature has set out has been met.
Within the last several years, Your Honor, there was a case that troubled a great many people, particularly those who've spent a lifetime in law enforcement, involved a convicted murderer in the state of Montana who had numerous appeals, seems endless appeals. And finally gets before the Supreme Court of the state of Montana, which decides to send it back to the sentencing judge to consider the fact that while this man was on death row, he was a model prisoner. Now, I find that so reprehensible that I find it hard to think about it without getting angry. I was just wondering how you felt about that particular type of thing. I don't know if I don't believe you were a part of that decision, but
Yeah, and I wasn't on the court when that particular case came up, and I can tell you that I was not aware of that case. My initial response to that would be that if an individual has been sentenced for a crime they committed and, you know, sentenced to, for instance, a death penalty or whatever sentence it may be, that what you need to consider in reviewing that are the facts that occurred prior to the sentence, not necessarily incidents that happened afterwards.
I'm very pleased with your answer, Judge.
Thanks very much for calling. Thank you. Do you see yourself as an individual like who is it a constant evolution? I mean, it can't be for everyone because everyone has different degrees of maturation process. But since we got into this death penalty business, and Justice Blackmun, retired from the Supreme Court, has just made it abundantly clear his regrets, during his service on the court.
And he came full cycle.
And he finds that the death penalty, finally for him, is in violation of the 8th Amendment. Am I right?
Yes.
On the number of the cruel and unusual punishment. Do you think that are you the kind of individual? How do you embrace an evolving life, evolving justice?
Well, you have to be open to change and learning, and every day on the court you learn something new. And I certainly, looking at the U.S. Supreme Court and the changes that those justices have made in their philosophies on this issue over the years, and you just gave a great example with Justice Blackmun. I think that's natural. I think that's part of the system, and I think it's inevitable that, to some degree, that your opinions and your views on certain areas are going to change. Now, whether they would change to the degree that Justice Blackmun's changed, would depend on every individual. But that's part of our law. That's the way it's designed.
And if there's a case before the Montana Supreme Court that I'm interested in, and that I believe that is affecting me as an individual citizen, do I have any way of becoming an amicus curiae, a friend to the court, if I could? How does that work? I mean, in other words, there's lots of cases in which one, as a citizen, feels,
You bet.
well, I've got some information that may be beneficial to the court and the people presenting this case. Is there any mechanism for, how does that happen?
Yeah, and there is a mechanism for filing friend of the court briefs or amicus curiae briefs, and we get a great deal of those briefs, a large number of those briefs. And if you can show the court that you have an interest in that area and have something to contribute, the court we're pretty liberal in allowing amicus briefs. A little less liberal in allowing amicus to participate in arguments, although that does happen, and it's going to happen here pretty in the near future. And that information is very valuable to the court, and you know, certainly welcome. And I can tell you that in recent cases we have used the amicus briefs as a major part of the ultimate decision.
Couple quickies. We have a little bit of time left. So I was talking when I was talking with Jim Regnier, who wants your seat,
Yes.
about this. We talked about the, and this goes back to when I read about how the Montana Supreme Court load has been, you know, onerous in the past, etc. That Vermont has what they popularly refer to as the rocket docket on the Vermont Supreme Court, in which a certain, you know, number of cases are heard. Oral arguments are only 5 minutes apiece from each side. Not the full court meets. Just, you know, I think it's 3 justices of the Vermont Supreme Court meet. They hear the oral arguments. They have all the paperwork, and they try to issue a decision within 24 or 48 hours. If they find that that it's a complex matter that's, you know, that they believe should go to the full court, then they decide that. As you look at the Supreme Court load, as you look at the state of Montana, do we need to look at some of these mechanisms, or?
Well, we have a modified mechanism in place right now that's to a degree similar to that. When cases initially come to the Montana Supreme Court, they're assigned to a 5-justice panel. And if we can get 4 of those justices to agree on a particular position, it doesn't go to the full court. I guess I would have some reluctance about having 5-minute oral arguments and decisions within 24 hours. I think perhaps that justice may suffer a little bit. Both my opponent and I agree that mediation is an area where we really need to look at and explore, and our court, the Supreme Court, has just instituted a new rule requiring mediation in several areas at that level to allow people, you know, that one last chance to get their case settled without going to the expense and the uncertainty of a Supreme Court decision.
Of all the, every justice on the Supreme Court has at least 2 clerks, right?
Yes.
And could you take a quick stab? How many are women and how many are minorities?
I can say right now that we're undergoing a change up there right now. I think there are 2 male clerks and the rest are female, and I am not aware of any minorities.
Okay. And do you think that...
Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
You know, you were talking about women on the court and women in public life. I was raised in a family that was active in politics, and my mother was the mayor of Great Falls back in the 1960s. And so certainly, you know, I am one who absolutely believes that women have a part in politics and in government, and you know, feel they do a very effective job.
Judge Erdmann, we have run out of time. I thank you for showing up on time and waiting for the Missoula Local Government Commission to do their job. And I've enjoyed our conversation.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And thanks for coming over from Helena.
You bet.
And best wishes in your campaign.
Thank you very much.
And bring us all the justice that you can.
I'll do my best.
All right. Thanks
Thank you very much.
Okay. Night. And this has been a public conversation. My name is McCarthy Coyle, and next week we have Becky Shaw, who's running for the United States Senate from Montana as the Reform Party candidate. And I want to apologize to Rick Hill, a GOP candidate for the House nomination. And Rick showed up tonight and for an interview, and my notes were messed up, and I'm hoping to be able to tape him tomorrow. I want to thank a great crew for, again, volunteering their time. Alan Matt, Nancy Rovastelli, and Jeff Smith, and Richie Doyle, and I think I'm forgetting a couple of people, but thanks everyone, and thanks to Missoula Community Access Television. And remember, this is your station. It's a First Amendment station. You come down here just like I do. You take the training, and you're on the air. So it's your shot. Come on down and use the facility. It's one of the best in the country. Good night, all. Music up. Thanks, everybody.
I got them PC blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, they won't let me calm my baby gal. I said I got them PC blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, they won't let me calm my baby gal. Said they won't even let me call my baby, baby. If I can't call a woman, Lord, I'm throwing in the towel.